Welcome back to the Forex Fortress. A little bit later today, and no Twitch stream today actually, but I will very likely be back on tomorrow with some new fun stuff included on that as well. But more importantly, we got some Forex action to talk about, of which Dixie the star of the day, as Dixie did head down to our long-term area, 89 3/4 last week. That was actually, which did set up the narrative, or did set up the buys for a little bit of a short-term, medium-term bounce, of which we've certainly seen a short-term bounce based upon that in the early morning hours. And Big Bad Crown did something very, very nasty today. He forgot to, why am I talking about myself in the third person? I forgot to essentially check on this coming into today, and this would have been a very obvious signal that, hey, yeah, Bitcoin's likely looking for a little bit of a short-term pullback here, and that would have helped round out the lower-term time frame analysis. But without that, things still more or less hold up on the whole. But what I would now say is that while the short-term bounce have certainly played out, I would now be looking for the weekly to essentially grind this area out, and maybe over the next few weeks it does mount in a more medium-term bounce to the upside. Now, long-term macro, is that anything indicative of a reversal? Well, no, because we don't really have any reversal of trend as long as we're especially below about 92 1/4. So that is a macro pivot right there. And then more importantly, we also do have that death cross in our face, which the last time we actually saw a death cross on this was way the fuck back on over here in 2002, 2003, when Dixie went all the way from about a little bit over 108 down to 70 and 71 region, which is perhaps the lowest that we've ever seen since gathering data for this chart. Anyways, more importantly right now, how does that fit into the overall narrative? Short term, medium term, sideways and likely up. However, long term, I still, my rule is I don't really look for a macro reversal until we actually have a macro reversal on trend, that is. And in this case right here, there's just not even a topic of conversation on that as long as we're below about 92 1/4. So with that in mind, a little bit of short term sideways and up, but that is going to work opposite of all of the major US dollar pairings, I'd imagine. So we're probably going to be having more or less short term biases to the downside here coming into this week. So let's see what Aussie dollar's got right now. And what do you know? Selling off on the 377 exponential average right there. Playing off the long-term ranges though, however, we do see it coming back down to our next relevant horizontal right below 75 cents. So how are we looking like on the short-term time frames? On the short-term time frames, probably does bounce up a little bit more. If I did have to overlay a target here anywhere around about 75 and 75.5 to 75.60ish region, so I'd be looking for on a little bit of a bouncy bounce. However, now there is a very obvious range implied, and actually we could just use this trend line right here. And in any price movement between this area right here and this area right here is actually technically still considered constructive. But the next sort of bias breaking move here would be any sort of a closure basically below the 4-hour 89 exponential average. So I'm just going to raise up my horizontal right there because I do think that it just works a little bit better. And if we do see a closure below there, then yes, I would be looking for the next leg down towards about 74 cent even. But as long as it's also in between this horizontal right here, it's just a game of ranges, and I'm looking to be a buyer on the support, seller, resistance, and well, I don't even really trade this to begin with, so it doesn't really matter. Let's go look at the daily though and see what the daily is looking like. Daily is looking a little more bouncy-ish as well. I'd probably be looking for this one to bounce back up, like I said, to about 75.5 cent, very likely, maybe even 75.60, and then come back to it tomorrow and check it out. And weekly, we're not really getting too much from this that hasn't already been set on the lower term time frame. So with that said, short term bounce, medium term bounce as well, and then we want to come back to it tomorrow and see what's up. Anyways, moving on to CAD dollar. What do we have right here? 77.5 it looks like, coming all the way down almost to the 10 symbol on the weekly. It would have been a very obvious bounce call if we did come all the way back down around there. Yes, last Friday did end on a bit, not just a bit, but a very obvious rejection, quite nasty. Let's see what the daily looks like as it is right now. Very similar to what we just saw. I would be looking for a little bit more of a bounce on this one, probably back up to 77.80ish region, perhaps medium term. And on the short term timeframes right here, very similar to what we just saw in the Aussie dollar, except a little bit of a different range. However, as we can just mark this off right here, boom, and yeah, right here, the last little breakdown zone. So I would be looking for a bounce off this level, yes. However, this bounce doesn't really have any change, this bounce is just really a bearish bounce here, as long as we're below about 78 cents. So short term, yes, bounce, but as long as below this area right here, it probably does come back down, to be quite honest with you. The weekly tells a story here, as this is a clear rejection and a front run of the 377 exponential average, and following a long-term downtrend resistance coming in from May 2015, marking off these last few higher lows. By the way, we're only about 10 days away from the end of the year here and the end of the month. So this monthly is starting to look a lot more distributive-ishly, and more importantly, this is within the context of lower highs over the last, Jesus Christ, like 10 years, more than 10 years, 13 years, going back all the way to 2007. And that would still be looking like a massive descending triangle, a redistribution pattern in the context of this current price action. Not good, in fact. Looking at Swiss franc dollar over here, one of the better actors, or at least on the monthly, so still looking good right there. Weekly just gets brought back down to last week's support, essentially, bouncing back up. So I would be looking for a little bit of a continuation on this bounce. At the very least, probably back up to about 1280-ish region, 1285 on the daily. What about the 4-hour here? Same thing, very, 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 very similar chart. Short-term timeframes, yes, bounce. However, under pressure here as long as this one's below 113, but long-term macro bullish buys as long as it's above essentially the pivot that we just came back down and tested today. So far so good. I wouldn't necessarily turn around to be bearish on this one as it is just yet, and of course the monthly does tell the story, and the monthly's looking more or less good to be fair here, but that obviously is going to imply a much further away time frame for this, for looking for further upside on this one. Moving to euro dollar, what do we see right here? Finally coming down, you little shit fuck. Yeah, that's right, baby. It's time to buy some houses. Actually, I mean, it would be nice to buy some house, but that's a whole nother can of worms, apparently. 4-hour, again, same thing. Short-term bouncy bounce, yes. Probably back up towards about 122 and 10 or 122.12 region. However, as long as this one's a little bit more difficult, actually. Weekly's still fine. I'm not really bearish on something that looks like this. Now, you know what? Short-term bouncy bounce. Dailies, more or less neutral. Weekly still bullish. So I don't really have a problem with this as it is. If it does want to swipe again to the downside, the obvious target is going to be 120.85 region, but I'd be looking for another bounce there. I'm not bearish on this one just yet. I wouldn't be bearish on this one even medium term as long as it's above about 120 and 3/4. If that level does get broken though, yes, I would extend the move down to 119 again, which would be oh so welcomed by me and my US dollars. Anyways, moving on to pound yen. What do we see over here? There it is, baby. So we did say that last week this was likely to be a sell-off area, and there you go, coming all the way back down here today. Now, I couldn't have necessarily told you that whole massive red dildo was going to get eaten up just today, but again, this is the long-term area here, the same area that has been selling off going all the way back to January 2018 and marking off all of the lower highs within the context of this ascending triangle. So long-term, I still do remain with my macro bearishness here, looking for 132 and 128 over time, and probably even braces to the downside over time too. But that's going to take time, so to speak, as this is a weekly after all. And if we go to the very short-term time frames, is it likely to bounce here? Probably yes. Very likely yes. A little bit of a bouncy bounce as it kind of cools off, but ultimately continuation of the downside is the name of the game. So short-term, a little bit of a bouncy bounce. I wouldn't even postulate a target on this one because overall this one is down, medium, long, and macro, with respective areas of interest down to 135.5 and about 134.5 as well. Anyways, moving on to pound dollar. What do we see right here? Ooh, nice one coming back down below that nice little, well, not so nice anymore. That long-term diagonal, of which, of course, this was created on a monthly. So is it still respecting it on a monthly? Yes. And as we come closer and closer to the end of the month, this starts to get brought back down below that area. What is that? What sort of bias does that put in? It puts in a bearish bias here still. So macro still a downside bias. Very similar chart to what we see on pound yen. Not as bad, I'd say, but selling off at the exact wrong time that you want to see it. If we go back down to a weekly, daily, probably be looking for a little bit more of an extension on this bounce. Actually, 134 is certainly not out of the question to come back up and retest, but I would be looking for this one to actually keel on over a little bit more. So short-term bouncy bounce, long-term, medium and long-term actually still down. Yen dollar, what do we see right here? Short-term bounce, I'd be looking for this one to pop back up to 96.75 region, and I'd imagine that medium term is looking more or less okay. Yep, I'd still be more or less bullish on this. And weekly, same thing. Weekly's actually a major opportunity right there. This one very likely does continue on to the upside. So again, this one pretty much bullish on all time frames, to be fair. Nasdaq futures, what do we see here? Did we get new all-time highs this week already or not? No, we came $5 shy of it, $5.25 actually to be exact, of new all-time highs. But is this just another higher low in the context of a higher high and higher low uptrend? I wouldn't necessarily say so just yet right here. Do you think that it probably has another swipe to the downside to go? Looking at the daily, Looking at the daily, could very easily be wrong about that. If it does close today below 12,420, I would extend the move all the way down here towards 12,150. So that is nearly a $100 move right there, which on Nasdaq does mean a lot more, to be fair. But I want to see that actually proven first. I'm very hesitant to get bearish on traditional markets right here. I do think that there's a little more downside on this move. Yes, don't get me wrong. I do think that there's more downside on this move. But would I be, posturing for a macro reversal here to the downside? No, not at all. The weekly is just a backfill. I'm looking at this as an opportunity. If it does come back down a little bit lower, like I said, 12,420-ish region, I look at that as an opportunity on first pass. I'd actually be looking for this one to charge back up here, very likely. Let's see. What do we have next? Gold. Yeah, we got some gold over here. Gold, critical weekly closure last week, and that is going to set into motion hidden bullish divergence, which has been confirmed as of, I guess, 2 weeks ago now. And more importantly, that will have a short-term target of about 1950 and a long-term target of about 2025 to 2030-ish region. We do see weekly Stokes popping back up as well. So I essentially look at this one as likely to carry on upwards and onwards from here. Looking at the daily, a little bit under pressure, yes, but momentum offsets are still more or less okay. There is one thing that could be problematic here. If the hidden bearish divergence does get confirmed, but would it get confirmed here? No, because technically we're in the context of a daily uptrend right here. We do have higher lows and then we do have higher highs. Yeah, so that's actually not going to that will not get confirmed right there, to be fair. It's probably due to my settings right now. So yes, I do think that this one ultimately pulls on through. Does it have another swipe onto the downside? I think that was it, really. That was probably it. Unless if it takes out the 200 symbol to the downside, which is 1860, then I think that was actually it right there. However, the play on this one is pretty damn simple here, though. I would be short-term, medium-term, and you might even say long-term bullish on this one as well, as long as we're above basically today's dump dildo right there, 1855. Any sort of a move below there going on from here and out, I would start to get short-term and medium-term bearish off that, targeting first to move down towards about 1825 and then further extension towards 1775 if that condition is met. But as it is right now, that wouldn't be my first interpretation of this. My first interpretation of this is that was an opportunity and very likely does play out the weekly signals now. Moving on to what now? Do we want to check out Bitcoin? Is it Bitcoin time? Yeah, let's go check out some Bitcoin. 22,735. And what do we have right here on the 4 hour? So I did say this morning that if Bitcoin did break below, let's call it, what was it? 12.6, or sorry, not 12. Jesus Christ, my numbers are just all out of whack today. 22,650 today, then I would be targeting move about $1,000 lower. We almost got that, pretty damn close. What did we get? 21,800 it looks like. Yeah, 21,800 on BitMEXCO. Close enough is close enough. On that regard, I guess that was, well, yeah, it's about an $800 move, and I was saying about $1,000 move, not being too specific with actual like price targets, but that's essentially what we were looking for right there. And I basically have the same call going on from here as well now, as long as Bitcoin's above this 22,650 pivot on a 4 hour closure. I still don't look at it as a breakdown until that area is actually officially broken on a closure. Did the 2 hour get it as well? Yeah, the 2 hour did get it as well, so that is fair enough. But I would be looking for this one to bounce first and foremost. Probably bounces back up towards 23,300 in the short, or sorry, make that 23,200 in the short term, medium term, or sorry, just short term, no. But medium term, does anything change here? Based off the daily, I just look at that as tested at 10 simple right there on the daily. I mean, it's not too problematic as it is. Potential bearish divergence will be confirmed here if we do confirm a local high here, but that is still a long days away. I want to go back to the weekly here too. I'm not bearish on any weekly that looks like this. So long term, I still have to be bullish on this. I still have to be looking for New-time highs based upon this. Of course, it was the secondary charts that was given that big buys towards that. And let's just reference that once again right here and see if anything's changed on that regard. Looking at the 12 hour, didn't even come down to the 20 simple. Jesus Christ, man, that's something right there. Let me put back on my 9 exponential moving average right here too. Just want something that's super low period. And yeah, of course, we're just kind of gripping onto it right now. But what about the daily? Okay, so the daily is very interesting here because the daily actually would confirm a little bit of a local high being put in if we do close today anywhere below about 23,200. That number that we just gave out earlier. So that does come up a couple times here. If that condition is met, I probably would start to potentially look for a greater pullback based upon this, or sorry, like a more medium term time frame frame pullback based upon this, but I still don't necessarily see that as the first and foremost likely thing to happen just yet. Looking at both the 3-day and the weekly right here, this would still imply new all-time highs likely this week, or at least grind this area out. And I think that this is further enhanced by Mr. Buterol. Remember this morning when we were looking at Mr. Buterol, which Mr. Buterol actually was a canary in the coal mine because it was looking very obviously bearish, alongside I think it was Link as well, and maybe Litecoin. It was I definitely remember saying Mr. Buterol though going down to about $600, and that likely would be an what's it called, an opportunity. Yes, that's based off the weekly backfill right here, of which pretty much got just about there. Open 590 and low of today 593. Looking. I mean, that to me is an opportunity. I'd be looking at that as an obvious bounce. Probably does try back up short term back towards about 620ish region. The question is now is, can it actually regain 620? If it fails to close this next dildo or two below 620, yeah, probably doesn't end up being the greatest opportunity of all time. Just a short-term bounce opportunity, of which, to be fair, I mean, that's still a pretty nice move here, especially on a 4-hour dildo. I mean, that's 4% move, not bad. But more importantly, we do start to see a few more bearish things going on right here. We do see DMI minus is dominant. The ADX is strengthening at the same time. We do see that MACD is really increasing on the histogram to the downside, suggesting that breakdown actually could be real here. So I would look for Mr. Buterol to be the more obvious of these charts. If we do get any sort of a closure basically below $600 on the daily, I would start to look for greater returns lower, back down to about 550ish region over time. But again, I'm not necessarily I'm not necessarily sold on that actually happening. The weekly, at least as I look at it right now, is still just an opportunity and would actually be implying another retest back up towards 650, perhaps later this week or next week. Something like that would be within the concept of the current market narrative. So all things considered, I do think that the market is more or less ready for a bounce on the short-term timeframes. I mean, that it's a little bit obvious. I would say that yes, Bitcoin mostly did hit the downside target based upon that breakdown that we saw earlier today. As that condition was met, now the question is, do we actually lose this level here? And if that level is lost, that will open up the doors for another move lower, of which the next targeted area for Bitcoin that I'd have to the downside would actually be just below 21,000, right around 21,000 bucks. I'm curious also what this would look like on a fib retracement perspective as well. And let's see what we got right here. Let's just do something like this, and I'm trying to line it up. Yeah, that would be okay. So the 618 is coming in right around 21,450, and we got the 786 at this level right here, right around 2627, or sorry, not 2627, but 20,600 to 20,700. Let's just call it 20,700. It's a little bit easier to say, or do it like this as well. Yeah, we'll do 20,700. That actually comes in a little bit more accurately. So, and it would also be akin to the 89 exponential moving average right here on the 4-hour, which is quite the magnet as well in this market. I just some weird things that I've noticed over time. More importantly though, that condition needs to be met first. For now, I'd actually be looking for this to bounce back up, probably back up towards 23,200, 23,300, and sideways within this range between 22.6 and basically 24,000 is more or less constructive. I don't have any major issues with that. And with that said, we'll come back to it tomorrow. Is there any obvious thing that would really just completely change around this analysis? So I want to make sure that I get this right, or at least as right as possible. Let's go back on over here. Daily, no, just bounced off the 9 exponential. I mean, not really that damning right there. We're just playing with big numbers right now. No, I don't even see a break in structure as it is just yet. So with that said, yeah, I'd still hold on with what I was saying earlier on this one. Short term, a little bit of a bouncy bounce, and then I want to see how things kind of respond tomorrow within this region right here and see where the daily sets up. And do we have a 2-day closing tonight as well? I believe we do. Yes, we do. Okay, so the 2-day, does that have any obvious signal here as well? Yeah, okay. Here's the obvious one. If the 2-day closes above 22,950, I'd be pretty damn confident calling new all-time highs probably later this week. If that condition is not met, then we could potentially talk about a more medium-term reversal, and the next target to the downside would be There's probably going to be a short stop at like 21.5, but I think they've already kind of played that move. Realistically, the next real area would be about 20,800 bucks or 20,700 bucks, somewhere around there would look about right. And then we'll come back to it after that, after a little bit of a bouncy bounce and reanalyze size it. But for right now, I would still, I'd still kind of hold steady. So with that said, I'd like to wish you the best and the happiest. Take care, and until next time.